Hello and welcome to Read the Bull, the only podcast dedicated to finance and investing books. I'm your host, Stefan Prelog, and today I'm thrilled to welcome my guest, Anthony Scaramucci. Anthony is the founder and managing partner of SkyBridge, a global alternative investment firm, and founder and chairman of SALT, a global thought leadership forum and venture studio. Welcome, Anthony.
Hey, it's great to be here. You're a longtime friend, and you helped me promote some of these books, which I'm very grateful for. You did such a great job, particularly on the little book of hedge funds. I appreciate you helping me with that one.
Thank you. Yeah, we've known each other, I think, going back probably now almost 15 years.
Yeah, well, I'm lying about my age, Stefan, so I was going to tell people we just recently met.
We just met, right?
No,
right.
But we know each other a long time, and you're great at what you do, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. There's so much to cover. And again, this is a podcast about finance and investing books, but you've had such a interesting career. And I guess for the uninitiated, just tell people what SkyBridge is and what you do.
Well, SkyBridge is a number of things. I mean, we originally started out as a hedge fund incubator where we seeded hedge funds, helped them get started. We still have some of that. Yep. We bought Citibank's fund-to-funds business about 13 years ago, merged it into SkyBridge, and so that has a great track record. It still has the chief investment officer, Ray Nolte, who has a 20-year record of running that fund, is still with us at SkyBridge. We have a private equity business. We've bought into some secondaries, so we have several $100 million in secondary market. Mm-hmm. We raised a secondary sort of unicorn recovery fund, which was a successful new offering. We have a coin fund. Yep. As I have more or less publicized, we've moved some of our assets into the cryptocurrency space, the digital property space. So we have a coin fund, very unsuccessful last year, very unbelievably successful this year. We have a ETF product called CRPT, which is a sort of publicly traded securities that are tied to the cryptocurrency markets and the ecosystem around digital assets. That's having a phenomenal year, but had a terrible year last year. Sure. And so that's a collection of our assets under management. And then away from the asset management piece, as you mentioned, we founded SALT about 14 years ago. We do that conference in 4 cities, which includes New York, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, and Hong Kong. Yeah. And that's been a phenomenal thought leadership event for us. And it's profitable business on its own, but it also feeds into the asset management business. So these are fun businesses. I have a podcast, if you don't mind me mentioning my podcast, called Open Book, where I feel I'm an open book, and I like interviewing like you. I like interviewing authors, but also thought leaders in different genres, which has been a lot of fun for me. My most interesting interview for the older people that are listening to you is with Barbara Eden, who was I Dream a Genie.
Of course.
And I had the opportunity to have dinner with her and her husband last month, which was the highlight of my summer.
We're a little bit.
And in case, I'm not giving up the tell, I had a huge crush on her as a kid.
I was going to say, we're about the same age. Anybody around our age definitely had a crush on Barbara Eden.
Yes, and I think she was very flattered to know that the 6-year-old version of me was crushing on her as much as the 59-year-old version. She's 91 years young and looks quite terrific.
I have no doubt. I'll have to look it up. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And I have checked out your podcast. So, we're complimentary podcast. We're focused on finance and investing books. You have such a great career, but you're also an author. And you've written now, and I just found out before we started talking, you have another book coming out, but you've written 6 books to date.
Yep.
And the first one was Goodbye, Gordon Gekko. And I think we met around that time, and then we worked together on Little Book of Hedge Funds, which is a Wiley title, and their Little Book series, which is a great book about understanding hedge funds. But tell me, because what was funny is when I was going back and reading Goodbye, Gordon Gekko, or I should say I did the audiobook. And I have to say the thing was I was disappointed because the audiobook was by Walter Dixon and not Anthony Scaramucci.
Well, he's got a great voice, as you and I both know. I think at that time, I probably didn't have a high enough profile for Wiley. Yeah. And so they didn't want me to read the audio version. They translated Hopping Over the Rabbit Hole and Goodbye, Gordon Gekko into Mandarin. And so I've had the opportunity to speak about the book in China This is before we had the political struggles that the U.S. is having right now with China, which I predict will start to, that coldness, if you will start to thaw. I think we just need each other too much.
Yeah. I wish you would have been like Sylvester Stallone and pushed, like I got to be in the movie. I wish you would have pushed, because Walter's, like you said, he's great. His voice is excellent. Is he British? I don't know. He's great.
He's got a little bit of a British accent.
Yeah, he's great, but he put me to sleep.
There's a British look to it. Well, I think you'll enjoy this. Oliver Stone wanted me to play some WASP figure in Wall Street. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I said, I read the script.
Right.
And he said, well, who do you want to play? I said, I want to play Anthony Scaramucci. He looked at me, he goes, you know what? You're going to play Anthony Scaramucci. So he let me. Right. Now, of course, you needed crazy glue to your eyelid to see me in the movie. If you blink twice, you miss me. But that was a lot of fun to be in the movie. And of course, he read the book. He gave me the idea for the title of the book.
I love the title.
And then he obviously wrote on the back of the book. He gave me an endorsement. Yeah,
it's a great book. And what's funny is you write in the book, like, I hope I have one book in me. And here we are now. You're going to be publishing soon your 7th book, which let's hold off on that. I want to talk about that.
Well, I got a big mouth, and so and I'm also my original idea was I was writing that book for my kids. Yeah. Because I thought it'd be at least for them to understand the journey of going from, and that world has changed, Stefan. We've lost that world. This is a world of cigarellos. Yeah. This is a world of bocce balls and the panino where you were playing bocce with your grandparents. This is a world where my uncles and my grandfather were drying legs of ham in the basement. Yeah. Wrapping and salting them so that they would turn into prosciutto. I can remember my uncle having the eels on Christmas Eve in the bathtub. Right. He would behead them right before he was ready to cook them. Yeah. And so that's a world that we've lost now. This was an old school, blue collar, Italian-American upbringing. Again, I was born in 1964. Yeah. So my parents were born in the 1930s. My grandparents were born at the turn of the century or just before the turn of the century in the late 19th century. And so this was old school living, an old school story. And then I had crashing impact with Wall Street. So I was dressed poorly. I was in polyester. Right. I was told by a Goldman Sachs partner that I was fully flammable for my first job interview. You're going to catch fire at any moment. Right. You got to go down to Brooks Brothers and buy yourself a suit. Yeah. I didn't understand the language of Wall Street, the mechanisms of Wall Street, and nor could I have, given the upbringing that I had. And so Goodbye Gordon Gekko was a rite of passage story. It was about the vulnerability of all that, the self-consciousness of it, getting fired and rehired into Goldman, failing the New York State bar exam, coming out of Harvard Law School, some of these really stupid early setbacks for me. Yeah. I wanted to chronicle them because I think it's important. I have found that my friends who are extremely wealthy, they have a tendency to cover up their shortcomings or cover up their failures. And then what ends up happening is their children get affected by that, believe it or not. You're better off with your children showing them everything, warts and all. It'll give them space for their own fallibility. It'll give them space for their own failures, but it'll also role model for them when bad things are happening, how you can pick yourself up. And all good entrepreneurs go through a crash and burn story. And how do you recreate yourself? How do you restart? How do you adapt? Yeah. And so the books are really about that. A lot of the books are about that.
Yeah, that's what I love, because you do weave a lot of wisdom into your story. And this was published in 2010. So up to that point, you were at SkyBridge. You had founded SkyBridge, but you have the reader come along and talk about all the failures and everything. And honestly, I think that suited you, not having the upbringing, and I think served you well. But you weave a lot of that in. And you talk about being your authentic self and give all these great life lessons as you detail, your history.
Oh, when you're a high-profile person, though, your failures are magnified. I had somebody say to me, "Wow, you've had way more failures than successes," and I laughed. I said, "Well, I mean, the media certainly thinks that. I mean, I think the point being is that if you're going to be high-profile, and you're going to be an entrepreneur in our industry, or take the political risks that I took, like working with Donald Trump, it's an example. When you fall on your face, you're going to fall in a very big, very large public setting. How do you handle that? How do you deal with the spotlight, and how do you deal with the predilections that people have? You know, I run into people say, "Oh, wow, you're a totally different guy than the one I read about in the media, or you're the totally different guy than the one that was caricatured on Saturday Night Live."
Right.
I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's how it works, you know. But there's no crying about that. You know, I don't believe in victimization or self-pity. I also tell people, if you go into the political arena or you show up on television or do a podcast like yours, you're a public figure. And when you are a public figure, you're going to get beat up.
Yeah.
And if everybody's liking you, Stefan, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
You're not breaking enough eggs. You're not creating enough havoc. I feel that without haters, you're not going anywhere. And what did Yogi Berra say? You know, he says, you know, they don't boo nobodies, right? So I mean,
exactly.
You get a Hall of Fame player coming up in a away game, the crowd boos him. You know, look at what we did to Chipper Jones as Met fans. Of course, he destroyed us. Ended up naming his kid Shea, and the point being is that he didn't care that we were booing him.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And you do talk a lot about failure in the book, and I think that's great that you own it so much. There's so many great stories, but a couple of just little things on the book. And first of all, for anyone who doesn't know, we're talking about Oliver Stone in the movie Wall Street. Gordon Gekko was a character played by Michael Douglas, who was the bad guy in the film. What I find kind of funny is, you know, through Hollywood, like, a lot of times, you know, the bad guy gets glamorized, and people want to be Gordon Gekko.
Well, Jordan Belfort certainly got glamorized by Leo DiCaprio,
right,
in Wolf of Wall Street. I think Gordon Gekko, to me, was a little more interesting because he was a fictional character, and he was a composite of the raiders in the 1980s. Some of them were caught doing insider trading. Some of them were caught doing things that were illegal.
Yeah.
And of course, in Wall Street 2, you see the legendary Gordon Gekko leaving jail.
Yeah.
He's leaving jail with that big clunky cell phone that he was calling people from in 1987 from his Hamptons beachfront estate. So you have this very interesting story, and there was glorification in that story. Yeah. And as I point out in that book and in my conversations with Michael Douglas, who won the Academy Award for the portrayal of Gordon Gekko, he was alarmed by the celebration of Gordon Gekko. Like, he could go into a restaurant here in New York City, and young swashbuckling traders would walk up to him and say, "Oh, you're Gordon Gekko," and rah. And he's like, "Excuse me, Gordon Gekko committed insider trading and went to jail." And he was a cautionary tale about greed not being good. But you're right. That is what happens. You get up on that big screen. You're larger than life to people. The story was, for me, that story came out, and I read about this in the introduction. I first met Oliver Stone in December of 1987, right when that movie was coming out. And he wouldn't remember the meeting, but I would. It was at the Harvard Square Theater. I got invited to attend a screening of the movie Wall Street. And so he had just come off of Platoon, a very successful movie, and here he is telling this story. His father was a stockbroker, and he was telling this story about the excess and the greed on Wall Street. And he said something in that speech, which I'll share with your listeners, because it's 36 years ago now, but he said, you know, the very famous poet Blake once said, "Excess leads to wisdom." And I think what Oliver was saying, the excess was not only in the larger-than-life figures and the big lifestyles they were leading, but it was in the risk-taking, and it was in the expanding your universe. And I think his point was, don't do it in a malevolent way, but be that risk-taker, be bold, be willing. You know, I could have stayed at Goldman. I had a good career there. I was a young man there, making a ton of money, and I was reasonably well thought of. Had a very nice book of business as a private client person or a private banker. But I left at the age of 32 to start a business. And I think about those two career arcs. The arc that I had led to writing books and going to the Sun Valley Conference with the Allen family and speaking at the World Economic Forum and traveling with the American military in Afghanistan or Iraq, or joining different boards or different presidential or gubernatorial campaigns. And I would have never been able to have done that at a big corporate firm like Goldman, because I would have been restricted from doing those things.
Right.
And so maybe I would have made more money or less money. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What I tell people, it's the life experience. It's the richness of your life, the learning, the meeting of the people, the trials and tribulations. And obviously you learn more from the failures than you do the successes. But for me, I'm very grateful that I was able to be bold enough. What did Virgil say? Fortune favors the bold.
Yep.
And so when you think of the goddess fortune, so much of our lives are outside of our control, but we do know that if we're leaning in and taking more risk, there will be bad outcomes, but generally the arc, the acceleration, the slope is way higher.
Yeah. And you do talk about Goldman Sachs, and you're working your way up, and you talk about you got to the floor where they were just basically miserable millionaires, where they're all because they were worth all this money, but then still trying to get further in the company.
Well, they do this foolish comparison with each other. So I'm sitting here, I'm worth $1 million, but the partner who's running the department, he's worth 10 million or less. Now today I'm worth 10 million, but the partner's worth 100 million.
Right.
And I'm upset that my life hasn't gone exactly the way I wanted it to. And what we do as younger people is we idealize our life. When I was coming out of school, I was envisioning my life. It was going up at a 45-degree angle, up and to the right. It was going to be a really smooth career, no mistakes being made.
Sure.
I was going to be very well thought of by everybody, well loved, all the different things that you idealize. And it doesn't happen that way. God's laughing as you're planning.
Sure.
Or as Mike Tyson says, you're getting smashed in the face, and now you have to readjust your plan.
Yeah.
And so that happened to me. And so I tell people what a great experience that is. Weirdly, it's a little under 6 years, or about exactly 6 years since I was fired from the White House.
Yeah.
And I tell people that was an extraordinarily painful.
It's been that long already?
Yeah, 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an extraordinarily painful time for me. I learned so much, would never take that out of my life. I mean, I learned so much about the American government, intelligence briefings, how the executive branch of the government works. I got to do a White House press conference. I flew Air Force One 3 times. I had, sat and worked in the Oval Office, sat and worked in an office down the hall from the cabinet room in the Oval.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot about your government. You learn a lot about the importance of the good actors in government. We don't want to be overly cynical about our government. And then boom, I'm abruptly fired, and I'm turned into a caricature on late night comedy. I'm destroyed in the cable news punditry, and literally, dragged outside of Pennsylvania Avenue by the media, which the media is known to do those things.
Sure.
And so those are painful moments. But man, what a learning experience, and I'm so grateful actually for all of that. I can remember walking on the promenade in Santa Monica, like the 3rd, 4th Street outdoor shopping area out on the west side of LA. And I'm with my son, he's 30 now, or maybe he's 31, he's probably 25 at the time. He's like, "Hey Dad, are you okay?"
Yeah.
And he was, for the first time, I was going to get parented by one of my kids, happened to be my oldest kid.
Yeah.
And he says, "What's going on in the press is a disaster. How are you going to recover from this?"
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, just watch me.
Right.
Watch me. And I think it's very instructive to people that you're never down and out until you call it quits.
Exactly.
You're never down and out until you believe that you're down and out.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for kids to show your fallibility.
Yeah.
It's important for kids to show your vulnerability.
Yeah.
But it's also important to show your resilience and that you're a tough SOB. You can take a lot of guff and keep moving.
Yeah. I had no doubt you were going to come back, but it was surreal, during that time watching it, knowing you. And seeing you up there, and I think I reached out at one point. I think
you're very sweet. You were very sweet to reach out. Listen,
I said, "Hey, do you need help?"
I was told by the White House press office, and again, I don't know if this is true or not, but I was told that my press conference on the 21st of July in 2017 was seen by 44 million people, which is about 40% of what a Super Bowl audience is.
Right.
And that's globally, because it was broadcast globally. And I don't know if that's true or not. But I remember walking up from lower press back up to the first floor of the West Wing, and I remember my phone ringing, and it was a political operative, and he said to me, "Are you crazy?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, that was a terrible press conference."
Yeah.
I said, "It was. I thought I did okay." He goes, "You can't talk like that to the American people from the White House. You're telling the truth to the American people. We got aides up here on Capitol Hill that are calling me saying, 'What do you have on opposition research on this guy? We got to get him out of here.'"
Oh my God.
And I remember thinking, okay, this is going to be a short-lived job for me. I didn't think it was going to be 11 days. but I thought it was going to be a short-lived job because the Washingtonians think very differently than the Wall Streeters.
Sure. And 11 days, you're now a unit of measurement.
Yeah. Well, if you go in the Urban Dictionary, you'll see, although I'm a little pissed at the Urban Dictionary, actually, because they say it's either 10 or 11 days. So let's try to clear this up. Even Trump and I like to spar with each other. We're both New Yorkers. I think he's like ridiculously weird and should never, ever be president again. But he even says when he's trolling me that I was there for 11 days. I think the president should be the official scorer. Right?
I think so. Let's say it here.
The
it was 11
Urban
days.
Dictionary says 10 or 11. Guys, it was 11. If you start the day on the 21st, you work a full day on the 31st, it's 11. You don't go 31 minus 21.
It's 11 days. Let's set the record here.
So anyway, but listen to me. But these are things that, like, if you said to me when I was growing up, and I was watching my uncle play the accordion, smoke his cigarillo, drink his black syrupy liquid, which was like probably the strongest espresso coffee in the world. I don't know how he didn't have tachycardia from it while he was smoking his cigarillo. And you said to me, okay, all these people, none of them ever went to college, but I was going to get the opportunity to go to Tufts and Harvard, work at Goldman, build a career on Wall Street, work in the White House. I would have said to you, okay, that's never going to happen.
Right.
But all of that stuff happened. And so I'm very grateful for it. Even the tribulations, even the bad sides of those things, I am very grateful for. I wake up in the morning and say, wow, I've gotten very lucky in my life. The journey has been incredibly interesting. I've met a lot of interesting people. I think it's very important for your listeners and your viewers to know, though, everybody is putting their pants on the same way. My wife and I talk about this. When I started the first SALT conference, I had invited some very high-profile people to that event, and I was awestruck by them. I was starstruck by them. These are people that I didn't meet before. I saw them in the paper, or maybe read a book that they had written or something like that, and now they're in the living flesh standing before me. And what did Churchill say? There is no hero to a man's valet. Okay, the point being is we're all putting our pants on the same. We're all roughly the same. But what may differentiate those people from you is the boldness. They may have taken that additional risk. If you read about Elon Musk, he was inches away from going bankrupt in both Tesla and SpaceX. He got the loans approved. He got some backing from NASA. Now he's the richest person in the world. Michelle Obama writes in her books about a near collision, a near divorce with Barack Obama. They were having a very desultory career. Mr. Obama said, look, I'm going to run for the Senate. Let me get one more shot at that. He had failed as a state senator. He won successfully, but he was having this meandering career. He goes on to become the U.S. senator, goes on to write his ticket into the American presidency. He becomes this hugely transformative figure, but again, inches away from not making it. Bill Gates, he fails with the first operating system. If he didn't get the $30,000 loan from his dad to buy the operating system from Digital Research, a Seattle-based software company, which he transformed into MS-DOS, could have been a different outcome. I can tell you countless stories like this. If Jeff Bezos in 2000, stocks down 95%, if he threw in the towel, he wouldn't have developed AWS, Amazon Web Services, and all the great things that he was able to put together at Amazon.
And he started by selling books.
Michael Dell, somebody that helped me start SkyBridge, the original investor in SkyBridge, the computer entrepreneur Michael Dell. Laptops were catching on fire in 1993. He had a choice. He could sell the compact computer, or he could go out and raise money, raise equity. put a convertible bond offering together in August of 1993, 30 years ago. And he goes on to become one of the richest people in the world. So what are the lessons? Okay, the lessons are you hang in there. The lessons are you don't get deterred by setbacks. The lessons are that you enjoy the journey as much as the destination. And don't be self-conscious. Who cares?
Right.
Nobody cares about you. And by the way, what other people think of you is none of your business.
Right.
But the good news is nobody really cares about you. They're focused on themselves.
Yeah.
They don't care.
100%.
So don't get overly worked up by what people think of you.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And so I want to talk a lot about the other books, but before we move on, there's such a great story about you getting into Tufts, and you had to take a Yiddish literature course.
Yeah.
I want to just talk about that because it's such a great little anecdote. Talk about why you had to take the course and what you learned.
Well, at that time, I don't know if it was codified, but it was sort of this unspoken thing at Tufts that you would take the course of your faculty advisor. So I had a economics faculty advisor, and then I had the provost of the university. And what I wrote about in the first book is a young, pimply-faced, polyester-adorned Anthony Scaramucci had an interview with the provost of the school. He's still alive, by the way. He's 90. Yeah. But I sat across from him at Blue Hall at his desk, and I said, if you give me the chance, if you let me into the school, I promise you I won't embarrass you. And he said, well, your grades aren't that good. Your SAT score was good, but your grades aren't that good, but I'm going to write you the recommendation. Mm-hmm. My dad had met somebody that had went to Tufts, liked Tufts, knew the provost. And so the guy said, okay, I'm going to write you this recommendation. Don't embarrass me.
Sure.
I got into the school. He was one of my advisors, and he taught 3 courses. Okay. Mm-hmm. One was the Introduction to Yiddish Literature. Mm-hmm. The subtitle was From Shtetl to Suburbia. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the old Eastern European towns, right?
Okay.
The slums. He had an introduction to German writers, which was Hermann Hesse and Thomas Mann, Rilke. Okay, and then the third course was on American baseball, why it is America's pastime. Mm-hmm. And I took all 3 of those courses. Okay. But the one I found the most interesting was the course on Yiddish literature because this was a Eastern European cabal, an Eastern European culture, very poor people that were outsiders. Jews in Eastern Europe were outsiders. They may have gotten ahead in places like Germany, but in Russia, in those areas in the border between Russia and Poland, they were outcasts, they were outsiders, and they got very badly mistreated. Yeah. And you can see the pain in the literature, you can see the pain in the stories, but you can also see the love, the unconditionality of love that the families have for their children and how these people develop their ideas about survivorship and this great, culture of tenacity, together, academia, all this great stuff was in this literature. And so I'm one of the few goys of New York, which is a non-Jew, by the way, that knows the difference between a shegitz and a shiksa, which is a shegitz is a female goy, a female non-Jew. Sure. I'm sorry, shiksa is a female non-Jew, and a shegitz is a male non-Jew. And I sometimes there's a lot of Jews living here in New York, of course, and so I sometimes bring it up. And listen, Italians and Jews are very similar. Right. I know you're from Long Island. I know that's stereotypical. I'm probably pissing off everybody, but we're very family oriented. Of course. I love Jewish culture, and I was fascinated by that course, and I write about it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Saul used to say in the course is, call your mother. Okay, she worries. Okay, call your mother. Right. And the Jews and Italians understand that. The ones that are listening in right now are like, Anthony's right. I got to pick up the phone and call my mom. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask for some of your favorite Yiddish words, but I think you've given a few of us.
Well, surus is one of my favorites, right? That's aggravation, okay? But also nachas. Nachas is this honor. Okay. This is when your children are doing well. You have a lot of nachas for them, And then cavelling.
Cavelling, sure.
You're bragging about your kids. I mean, these are great words. Yeah. I mean, this is a lost language that hopefully new generations will at least pick up some of it because it's it can speak to you in a way that really touches your soul. Yeah. No, it was great. It was a great
anecdote and a great story in the book. So look, I want to talk about your writing, because as busy as you are and as much as you do, you've written now 6 books, about to publish your 7th. We have 3 of them here: Goodbye Gordon Gekko, Little Book of Hedge Funds, and Hopping Over the Rabbit Hole. The other ones are The Sweet Life of Bitcoin, Trump, the Blue Collar President, and the most recent one, The Genius of Algorand. So I'm gonna ask. They're all kind of different. I would say you're finance famous, but you're a financier, but you're also an entrepreneur. Starting multiple businesses. These books all kind of touch a little bit about the different facets of your life and what you're done. So they're all a little bit different. Obviously, the book on Trump was focused on politics and your experience there. But tell me a little bit about your writing process, and which has been your favorite book to write?
I'm going to say that my favorite book is the one I haven't written yet. I'm going to explain that, because I feel like when I wrote Goodbye Gordon Gekko, I was about 43, 44.
Yeah.
I'm about to turn 60. And I think as you get more humbled by life, and you start to realize how much of life is outside of your control, I think you take a different prism of perspective on life. Yeah. And so I think that the books that I'm going to write, I think will hopefully be the best ones, or the ones that I enjoy writing the most, because I think I just have a different perspective today than I did back then. Yeah. But I enjoyed writing all of those books, and I do write them. If you read the book and you've listened to me on a podcast or you've seen me on television, like, okay, guy obviously wrote the book because it sounds just like the way he speaks. Right. I do have an author helper. I do have an assistant. I do have an editor, but I do write the books, and I try to write them on planes. I try to write them. I do a lot of dictation to my assistant, and then she'll put it together for me, and then I'll reframe it and try to revise it, make it more concise, make it simpler. But I love writing. I think it's very, very important. If you want to learn something, write. And what did Socrates, what did the ancients say about knowledge? Knowledge comes with self-awareness. The first stop on the way to true knowledge is to know thyself. And Socrates also said that the smartest among us realize that we know nothing. There's just this great mystery of life. And so we can make these observations, we can learn some axioms about life, we can learn some things to teach our kids culturally, which will be good tools for them as they're navigating relationships, business relationships, professional relationships, romantic relationships, family relationships. And we can see these patterns that continually manifest themselves. Wolfgang von Goethe, he said, if you are operating in this planet without studying 3,000 years of history, you're operating blind. And so for me, I like to tie a thread to the ancient world. There's people that lived thousands of years ago. They had wisdom. We're basically in the same body from an evolutionary perspective as the ancients. You're in a 100,000-year-old piece of machinery. Oh boy, we're getting metaphysical here. It hasn't had a software upgrade in 100,000 years. Right. Your phone went from iPhone 1 to iPhone 14 in 15 years, but not you. And so you have atavism in your personality, you have greed. There's darkness in your personality. Robert Greene writes about this in the 48 Laws of Power. I've interviewed Robert on my podcast. If you don't acknowledge your darkness, if you don't acknowledge the weaknesses that you have, then you can't overcome them. You can't create that transformation, or what would Siddhartha say, the original Buddha, right? In order to go to the sublime, you have to remove the elements of the animal that you're encapsulated in, right? And so again, don't want to get overly metaphysical, but the point being is, this is wisdom from the ancient world that you can apply to the contemporary world. And I think it offers a perspective. And since I did get metaphysical, I'll make one more metaphysical statement.
Let's do it.
You can Google this, because I've Googled it. How many people have lived on planet Earth? According to Google, it's approximately 100 billion people have lived on planet Earth since there was the origination of the Homo sapien. So about 8 or 9 billion of them are living right now, but 100 billion people have lived on Earth, and God bats 1,000, or in the immortal words of Mel Brooks, relax. None of us are getting out of here alive, right? I mean, right? I mean, he's like my philosopher king. And so you need to embrace that in your life.
Sure.
And I think that causes you to focus. It gives you clarity. When you're getting your ass fired from the White House, you're like, okay, who cares? Okay, I'm going to Italy.
Right.
I'm going to drink a glass of wine. I'm going to have a big slice of pizza. And I'm going to go enjoy my life. Who cares?
Who cares? What does it all mean?
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so you can say, what does it all mean? And you can get depressed about it.
Exactly.
Or you can say, what does it all mean? This is so exciting.
Right.
Let me run this thing with all this creativity, all this energy. Let me see where things go. Let me explore new ideas, new relationships, new businesses.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a fun thing. Oh, there's bad things to it because human beings get a package of tragedy. Okay, they start out and they know they're going to end. They're aware of their mortality. You got to watch your loved ones die, unfortunately, particularly your mom and dad.
Yep.
And that's if you're lucky. The real tragedy was have your mom see you die, God forbid, because you want the order of things to go in the way that the nature has ordained it, or typically ordained it, because everything happens in ways that we can't control. But my point being is that, like, you live life to the fullest if you can live in the present, but you can also recognize and embrace your mortality and actually enjoy your life as a result of it, as opposed to being upset about it.
Yeah. I love this. I didn't realize we were going to get this philosophical, but I love this discussion. And,
But you see, that's a template, Stefan, for attacking the world. Yeah. So whether it's on Wall Street, politics, you're going to start a new company, you're going to build an energy drink, you're going to make a tequila brand. Yeah. That's the template. You want to go for things with that relish and with that gusto. You don't want to be hesitant or overly cautious because you're going to be dead anyway. I mean, who gives a shit?
No, but look, I'm going to bring this back a little bit because I love this discussion. But in Goodbye Gordon Gekko, you and for anyone who thinks that Anthony is BSing here, I remember being in your office and you had this, you have a great bookshelf, and you've said you've read all these books, and you have a great love of history. And at the end of Goodbye Gordon Gekko, you even have a reading list. Do you remember the reading list?
I do. Well, most of it, yeah.
Probably, so we'll pick it up.
I don't know if I don't know if I can get all of them.
I'm not going to quiz you, but
the big ones, the Iliad is probably on there, the Odyssey.
The Odyssey, and you have a lot of history. Mm-hmm. You have the Odyssey, Augustus, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, great book.
Lincoln at Gettysburg, The Gold Coast by Nelson DeMille.
A phenomenal book. Yeah. Oh, God, that's such a fun book.
Churchill.
I'm surprised they never made a movie of that book. Okay, Churchill. Which Churchill was it? Was the
by Roy Jenkins?
Roy Jenkins. Yeah, that was the one in 2000. Yeah, Andrew Roberts wrote a great one.
A Peace to End All Peace by David Fromkin.
Yep. You got to understand the Middle East. You got to read that book.
Yeah. We were just talking about Saul Gittleman. So from Shuttle to Suburbia, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
The Psychology of Winning. By Dennis Whaley. Yep. Learned Optimism and
Martin Seligman.
Yep. And The Last Lion by Winston Churchill.
Yeah. Well, Manchester, actually, William Manchester.
I'm sorry, about Winston Churchill.
There were two books about Churchill that really moved me. Roy Jenkins was a comprehensive 1-volume. Manchester wrote 3 volumes. He passed away before he finished the third one, but they got an author to write the third one, finish it up for him. Brilliant third book. But the second book, to me, is the one where you really get to see who Churchill is. He's the last lion of the British Empire, and he is struggling with depression, and he's struggling with a meandering mid-career. Not super successful. He's a backbencher. He's being ridiculed by the people in power. He's calling out Hitler. He is not pronouncing the word Nazi. He is saying Nazis because he, quote unquote, does not want to give the Nazis the respect of pronouncing it properly. And he explains to Chamberlain and others that they are a great scourge that are descending on the earth. They are the angel Lucifer present on earth. They don't listen. They go into 38 and they try to appease Hitler. They fail at that appeasement. He declares war in September of 1939. It upsets the British government. Eventually, Chamberlain loses power. They don't go to Churchill first. They go to Lord Halifax. He doesn't want the job. Right. He doesn't want to oversee the destruction. He doesn't want to be the prime minister when Hitler destroys the country. And so it falls to Churchill. And here's Churchill at the age of 65. He writes in his diary, I spent 40 years in the wilderness. I was a war hero at age 25, wrote a best-selling book. I meandered through my career, but all of this pain, all of this setback, anything you want to call it in my life, Gallipoli, all the things that happened to him, this shameful humiliation that he's experienced has now prepared him for the fight of his life.
Right.
And for the fight of his country's life. And so this is a great metaphor about life. And what would Churchill say? Never give up.
Never give up, right.
Okay, and in the face of danger, be bold.
Yeah.
But in the face of victory, be magnanimous.
Yeah.
Be charitable, be caring to other people. And so these are lessons. And so, I tried to put at the end of the book books that I've read that have had really big impact on my life. Because you have to remember, I am a blue-collar kid. My parents didn't go to college.
Yeah.
And so I have read my whole life as a didactic tool.
Right.
Almost, I find these authors and these people to be mentors of mine. What's a great thing about a book, whether it's Read the Bull or any book, you're getting a great one-way conversation with somebody.
Right.
And, why do I love books? Same way you do. For $20 and 10 hours, you can get 10 years worth of an education. Someone had to put thought into writing that book.
Right.
And you can get a condensed knowledge, condensed version of what they're saying. And listen, I'm Anthony Everett wrote the Augustus book. Since that book, he wrote The Rise of Rome, The Rise of Athens. He also wrote a great book on Alexander the Great. And so, to me, you want to read about the ancient world. They are no dumber than us. They may have more sophisticated technology in some ways, which frankly has hurt us in some ways.
Yep.
But you can learn a lot from their life experiences and their acceptance of their mortality.
Yeah, I like that. You have a chapter dedicated, say, if you want to learn, you read. And I agree 100%. And so let's bring it to current day. You told me before we got on here that you're going to be writing you're about to publish a new book. Tell me about that.
I finished the manuscript. I think the working title of the book is From Wall Street to the White House and Back. Okay. Scaramucci's Guide to Unbroken Resilience.
Nice.
And the notion is that, don't care. Live your life to the fullest and get up off the mat. I'll tell your viewers and listeners, if you're having a bad day, get my phone number from Stefan and call me, because unless it's cancer, I can tell you about my day when I got my butt fired from the White House and dragged into Pennsylvania Avenue and rolled in margarita salt after they skinned me alive. Yeah. And I think it's very important for people. You can overcome any setback. You are going through a divorce. You didn't get into the school you wanted. Your career's not going perfectly. Yeah. You and your spouse are fighting, or something's going wrong in your life. Yeah. You can make an adjustment. You can make things better. And you got to live in the present, right? Because, in hopping over the rabbit hole, I talk about Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, who says, if you're living too much in the past, well, then you get depression because you'll have regret about mistakes that you made, because there's nobody on planet Earth that's lived long enough that didn't make a mistake, didn't go to the right PR firm, or didn't go to the right Wall Street firm, whatever it might be. Yeah. You're making lefts, rights, and sometimes they go the right way and sometimes they don't. But if you think too much about that, you'll be depressed. Yeah. If you live or think about the future, well, we can't control the future, and so we create all of this anxiety in our personalities because we're anxious about what could be. Yeah. So how about dropping both of those and just live right here in the present? Yeah. Right here in the podcast that we're talking. This notion of this breathing here and now, as opposed to doing all the worry. Yeah. And I think it's very important to dial yourself into that. Yeah, I love that. A great book about this stuff is Atomic Habits. Yeah. James Clear wrote a great book. And that's why I think he sold 15 million copies, because I think the point is, every day get up, make yourself incrementally better. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to reading that book, and we'll have you back. I want to just end on a quick note, because do a little bit of a speed round, because we've talked about a few things, and we do focus on finance and investing.
But we talked a lot about Goldman Sachs, and obviously you have some history there. What do you think about what's going on with banks and the culture at Goldman Sachs these days?
Well, I'm an observer like anybody else. I mean, I've been out of the firm for 27 years. So I don't think it's fair for me to opine as an insider. I think that they made some strategic decisions that they were attempting, and this looks like from the outside, they were attempting to grow organically a retail business or grow organically a retail banking business. And I think their peer groups, or the successful ones in their peer group, like a Morgan Stanley, made the decision to do inorganic growth. They went and bought Smith Barney. They attached Dean Witter to the thing 20 years ago, Smith Barney 15 years ago. They recently, in the last 5 years, bought E-Trade. And so this synergy through M&A activity has been very beneficial. Think of what BlackRock and Larry Fink did in buying BGI, the global advisory group from Barclays that was manufacturing all these ETFs. BlackRock, under their tutelage, that goes on to become the largest asset manager in the world. And that's an example of inorganic growth. And I think the culture of Goldman Sachs has always been to grow things gradually and grow things internally, and that was a great culture in the 80s, phenomenal culture in the 90s, but it may not be working at scale in 2023. And I'm just making that observation.
Sure.
But I think there's phenomenal people there, phenomenal franchise, world-class group of people. It's a phenomenal alumni network. I can tell you that,
of course.
Like in Rome, all roads lead back to Goldman Sachs. And so we've had several secretaries of Treasury from Goldman, and we've had great economists, public servants from Goldman. Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey, is from Goldman. I mean, he's a very close personal friend of mine. So I think this firm will adapt, and it's not a firm I would bet against in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's a brilliant place. But I think if you're just analyzing it from a Harvard Business School case study perspective, they probably went with their knitting, which was organic growth. And of course, if you misstep a few times with organic growth, the people that are growing inorganically are going to overwhelm you temporarily.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I think they'll be fine. You wrote we worked together on a little book of hedge funds. Obviously, SkyBridge works with a lot of hedge funds. How do you feel about the state of alternative investments, which we call them now? But how do you feel the state of hedge funds these days?
Well, I'll just slam myself a little, because when I wrote that book, I thought the industry at this point in time, wrote the book in 2012, it's 11 years later. If you said to me in a podcast in 2012, what would the industry look like in 2023? I would have said 6 to 7 trillion.
Right.
We've got about 3.8 trillion.
Right.
So the industry did not grow alongside of the stock market. The industry did not grow in a way that I thought it would, through lots of capital flow into the industry. So what basically happened is the Fed jammed interest rates to zero.
Right.
Zero interest rate policies made ETFs and long-only vehicles very, very successful, these low-cost long-only vehicles. And so lots of money has leaked out of the hedge fund space over that period of time. Some of it's plowed into private equity and venture, but it more or less just was in the stock market in a long bias way.
Sure.
And so the question now is that going to be the next 5 years? I don't know the answer to that, because what I will say is interest rates are back to where they were in 2007.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you could see a scenario where these hedge funds start to do better, and there's a movement back into the capital going into the hedge fund. So I don't know, but I'm not in love with the secular dynamic of what's going on in hedge funds now.
Okay.
Our fund of funds business is down, the assets are down. Our performance is great this year, wasn't great last year. And so you know how it works. You're only as good as your last trade. You're losing money when it's not great. We're gaining money now that it is great. But ultimately, you'll have to tell me where interest rates are. I can tell you whether or not the industry is going to grow.
Yeah.
High interest rates, good for the hedge fund industry.
I think so, yeah. And I think it's an interesting time for investors and good for stock pickers to really kind of prove their worth. So we'll see. So Anthony, you published all these books. Who's editing your book? And tell me just about that process a little bit.
So I've been very fortunate. I've had Deborah Englander on every one of my books.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very, very grateful to her.
Yeah.
She started with me at Wiley. She moved over to Post Hill Press.
Yeah.
And so she has been the editor of every one of my books. And, I think she was, if she's listening to this, she'll probably have to admit that I think she started out not liking me. Okay? I think she looked at me like I was some kind of superficial Long Island Guido.
Okay.
And then she started reading my writing, and I'm talking about Aeschylus and Euripides and Shaw Moleculum, writing about the shtetl,
Right.
She started realizing, wait a minute, there's a lot of depth to this guy. He's not just a two-dimensional Guido from Long Island. So we've become very close.
Nice.
And it's, like you, it's about a 15, 16-year relationship.
Yeah.
And she's a stickler, though. She'll tell me, she'll call BS on me all the time.
Yeah. Deborah's great.
She's somebody she reminds me, she'll be really mad at me for saying this, but I'll say it anyway. She reminds me of the nun that used to teach my catechism class. Generally liked me, but would hit me with a hot poker once in a while.
A hot poker? Oh, my God.
Well, not a hot one, but you know what I mean. That pointer,
Right.
They'd smash it on your fingers when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So Deborah does that to me metaphorically, because if I'm going down a wrong literary direction, or if I'm not writing something that makes sense, she'll be the first one to tell me that I'm a shugana. How's that for a good English word?
There we go.
Right.
And she's going to let you do the audiobook for this one, right?
I think so. I think I get a shot to do the audiobook on this.
Fantastic. Okay, so I know you have a good sense of humor. Who was your favorite Scaramucci? Was it Bill Hader or Mario Cantone?
All right, so I'm close to Mario. Okay, I became friends with Mario.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, so I got to say Mario, because he is such an Italian Mario, okay? And he ambushed me on The View.
Yeah.
And they had him wearing the same outfit as me, and my mother loves him.
Yeah.
I ran into him on a street.
Okay.
Downtown, he's like screaming my name. He's running over. We're taking pictures together, hugging each other.
Okay.
So I'm going to say Mario.
Yeah.
But I'll tell this quick story if you don't mind.
Of course.
I'm at the Met Yankee game. I'm sitting in the Legends area where they have this big, food court, if you will, behind home plate, Yankee Stadium. And I'm on the buffet line, and I'm looking at the guy next to me. I'm like, I recognize this guy. Okay, it's Paul Simon. Okay, and he's obviously from Simon and Garfunkel.
Sure.
And next to him is Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live. And next to him is Colin Jost, who's married to Scarlett Johansson now. He's one of the anchors on Weekend Update. And I got my tray of shrimp, and I'm looking at those guys, and they're looking at me. And then finally Lorne Michaels looks at me and goes, "Mooch!" I said, "Yes, Lorne." He goes, "Well, what did you think of Bill Hader's rendition of you?"
Right.
And I looked at him and I said, "More hairspray, okay? Right. Let me just tell you, okay? There's a lot goes into the hair products,
right.
A lot goes into this formation of this helmet crown."
Yeah.
And I said, "He's got to tie his tie tight,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
I'm on uptight Wall Street."
Yeah.
Okay, but they did call me human cocaine, which my kids liked a lot, right? They thought that was great.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing. If you're getting made fun of, roll with it. Who gives a shit? Right?
Roll with it.
When Colbert said, "Did I think I was going to last a long time at the White House," Stephen Colbert, I was like, longer than a carton of milk in the refrigerator. I didn't think it was going to get blown out that quickly.
Right.
But, so Lorne invited me to the Saturday Night Live Christmas show 2017. Okay. So my kids were pumped. I took my kids. I took my wife. And in the cold open, there is Alec Baldwin. Mm-hmm. He's playing Donald Trump. It's the Christmas show, and they've got two trees. And the woman playing Sarah Huckabee is going to hand them ornaments. And so the Trump figure is looking at her saying, "Sarah, hand me the ornaments for the Christmas tree of love." Ivanka Trump. Ivanka Trump. Ivanka Trump. So every ornament on the tree is Ivanka because he only loves Ivanka.
Of course.
Okay, now hand me the ornaments for the tree of hate. And he's Jeff Sessions, Chris Christie.
Right.
Where the hell is that Scaramucci ornament? And there's my head on an ornament. And of course, they take the camera, they flash to me and the studio audience. I am beet red like a cherry. I'm waving. Right. What am I going to do?
Right.
And they put my ornament on the tree. But I'm going to tell you what. When the show was over, when I got to the after party, I asked the stage manager for the ornament.
Yeah. Okay.
And that ornament is on my
that's
tree
amazing.
at home.
That's awesome.
Okay, so the point being, what are you going to do? We roll with the punch, man. Who
That's
cares?
it. That's it.
Learn to laugh at yourself,
Yeah. Well, that's a great place to leave it. Anthony, that's your time on Read the Bull. Thank you so much.
I appreciate being here.
Okay.
Terrific. Thank you.